Hmm. So it's like Baomer, and the like Baomer, it's not just that we don't mourn. In other words, that we stop the avelus of the Yemei Asfira, but we also celebrate. I mean, we don't say Tachanun. I mean, on a regular day in Chodesh Cheshvan, when there was no Magefa, we say Tachanun. But on Lag Baomer, so the Magefa was Pascha. So that's the reason not to mourn. But where's the happiness? I mean, the simcha of Lag Baomer, where does that come from? Not so clear. The emphasis, in the later Doris, it's referred to as Hilula de Rashbi, the day of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai's happiness, probably only since the time of the Arizal. But that also is not clear. Why is Lag BaOmer the day of Hilula, the day of festivity of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai? How does Reb Shimon Bar Yochai connect with Lag BaOmer, and why is it his day of happiness? So the Pri Chodosh in Siman Tov Tzaddik Gimel does address the issue of why Lag BaOmer is a day of simcha, and he asks, "Mihu yesh ledaktek simcha zu lama v'hi mishum shepasku lamus ma bekach harei lo nishar echad mehem v'kulam mesu." All Rabbi Akiva's talmidim died, so there was nobody left to die. So there was no Magef anymore. So that's no reason to celebrate. Uma harei lo nishar echad mehem v'kulam mesu uma tiva shel simcha zu ve'efsher. You know that afterwards, Rabbi Akiva, the Gemara tells us, came Eitzel Rabbi Seinu Shebedorim, and he taught Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda and Reb Yossi and Reb Shimon and Reb Elazar ben Bar Shamoya. He had 5 new Talmidim, and those Talmidim didn't die. And that's what we're celebrating, says the Pri Chodesh. L'chayre, darf man verstehen, because the Lashon HaGemara is v'kulon meisu beperek echod mipnei sheloi nahagu kavod ze lozeh v'hoya ha'olam shoymeim ad sheba Rabbi Akiva v'shana eitzel Rabbi Seinu shebedorim v'shana lahem. So weiss the chois that was hoya ha'olam shoymeim. The world was desolate. I mean, it was a churban until at Sheba Rabbi Akiva Eitzel Rabbi Seinu Shebedorim. The mashmos haloshen is that it took some time, maybe a few months, maybe a few years, until Rabbi Akiva was bo Eitzel Rabbi Seinu Shebedorim, and during this time it was Hoya Ha'olam Shoymein. What the Pri Chodesh is saying only makes sense if we say that on this day of Lag BaOmer, Rabbi Akiva took on new Talmidim, and they didn't die. And that's why Lag BaOmer is a day of Pasku Lamus, because Lamed Beis BaOmer was the last day of the death of Talmidim Rabbi Akiva, and on Lag BaOmer he took on new Talmidim and they didn't die. But if he took on the Talmidim a time later, so how is Lag BaOmer the day of Pasku Lamus? Lag BaOmer they didn't die anymore because there were no Talmidim. I mean, maybe the day of Pasku Lamus is the middle of Chodesh Kislev. So the Lashon HaGemara is Avada not Mashma. The emes is like this. The Medrash in Koheles Rabbah, Perek Yud Aleph, says, Rabbi Akiva Omer, Yud Beis Alofim Talmidim, Hoyuli Migvas Va'ad Antifras, V'kulam Mesu B'chayai, Bein Pesach LaAtzeres. They all died during my lifetime, between Pesach and Atzeres. Now, what does it mean during my lifetime? Avada, they didn't die before his lifetime because they were his Talmidim. And Avada, they didn't die after his lifetime because he's still talking. So obviously they died during his lifetime. So why is he saying V'kulam Mesu B'chayai? It would seem that they didn't die 1 year. Bein Pesach LaAtzeres. V'kulam Mesu B'chayai mi Pesach LaAtzeres. Every year between Pesach and Atzeres there was a Magefa. with Talmidei Rabbi Akiva. And Kula Mesu B'chayai, Bein Pesach La'atzeres. That's the mashmos of the Medrash. So now the pshat is like this, that if we say that Balak Baomer, they were Paskul Amos, it could be either that every year they stopped dying on Lag Baomer, or that the last batch stopped dying at Lag Baomer, but then there was really a psika. And Mamela, it's not shver what the Pri Chodesh is asking, L'simcha mazu oisa, all the Talmidim already died. Because if we say that every year they stopped dying on Lag Baomer, so it was a day that Talmidim stayed alive for another year. So there's a simcha in the Paskul Amos if we say that every year they stopped dying on Lag Baomer. So why is he saying that the simcha is based on the last 5 Talmidim? So we Vice Dosi learns of the second oifen, that only the last year they stopped dying on Lag Baomer. And that's why he's asking that they all the Talmidim died already. So what's the simcha? So now I want to say, what's his answer? That since every year they were dying, so if the Gzeira wouldn't be misbattled, so even those Rabbi Seinu Shebedorim that Rabbi Akiva came and taught afterwards would have also died the next year during the Sfira, or the next year during the Sfira. So the Paskul Lamus of Lag Baomer happened the last year of this Magefa. They stopped dying on Lag Baomer. Every year they were dying between Pesach Latzeres. The last year there was a psika on Lag Baomer. And that accomplished that next year or 2 years later, when Rabbi Akiva took on Talmidim, they didn't die. And that was because of the psika that happened on Lag Baomer, that Paskul Lamus. Now, the Chidah in the Maris Ayin writes about the he brings this Pri Chodesh and he says ve'efshe shebelag ba'omer hischil Rabbi Akiva lelamed l'Rashbi v'chaveirov. So you see, he was bothered by this question, and he wanted to say that the Pri Chodesh learned that he was belag ba'omer. He took on Talmidim and they didn't die, and that's why the psika of Lag Ba'omer is something that we celebrate. But as I said, the Gemara is avada not mashma like that. The Gemara says, "V'hoyo ha'olam shoymim ad shebor Rabbi Akiva ve'etzel Rabbi Seinu shebedorim v'shana lahem." So in Mela L'chor, it's much more nichet to say the way we're saying that he took those Talmidim on much later. But the pshat is every year during his lifetime, his Talmidim would be dying during the time of Ben Pesach Latzeres. And the last year that they died, it stopped on like Baomer and Mamela. When he took on Talmidim later, they didn't die. Now, so the day is referred to as Hilula de Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, and as we say, it has no source in Chazal. It's Reb Chaim Vital writes in the Shara Kavonis about Tzviras Oimer. He writes, Inyan minik shenoagu Yisrael laleches beyoim lag ba'omer al kever Rashbi v'Reb Elazar benoya shekvurim be'ir Miron kanoida v'oichlin v'shoisim u'sneichim sham. Ani ro'isi le'morizal, I saw my Rebbe the Arizal sheholach l'sham v'chulei. Gam heyid harav Reb Avram Halevi ki b'shona hanizkeres holach gam husham. V'hoyo noyeg loymar b'chol yoim b'birchas tishkoin nachem Hashem Elokeinu es avela Yerushalayim. This Reb Avram Halevi used to insert into the bracha of Tishkoin, the bracha of Bnei Yerushalayim in the Shemoneh Esrei. He used to say every day, Nachem Hashem Elokeinu es avela Tzion, etc. The gam behi yoisoy shom omar Nachem omar loy moiri ki ra b'hokitz es Rashbi oimid al kivroi v'omar loy. And Moira lo isha ze Avram Alevi ki lama oimer nachem b'yom simchaseinu. V'hinei lochein hu yeh benachama b'karev, meaning that he's going to die soon. V'lo yotze chodesh yomim at shemes loy ben echod v'kibel olav tanchumen. Yeah, v'kasavti kol ze lohoyrois ki yesh shoresh b'minig hazeh anisker. Yeah, ubefrat ki Reb Shimon Bar Yochai olav hasholem who mechamisha talmido v'agdolim shel Rabbi Akiva. V'lochein zman simchasa yubalak b'oimer. So it seems taka like the Pri Chodesh, that the psika of the Misa on Lag Ba'omer accomplished that the Talmidim that Rabbi Akiva took on afterwards didn't die. And therefore, this is a day of happiness for the 5 Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva that became his Talmidim afterwards, the Rabbi Seinu Shebedorim. But Lefi Zeh, like Baomer, doesn't have a particular shaykhis with Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. It has a shaykhis to the Talmidim that Rabbi Akiva taught, Biziknusai. So it's not so clear why the minig is to go dafke to the kever of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Yeshua Yorah, do we know where the kvarim of Reb Meir and Reb Yosi and Reb Elazar Bar Shemoya?
Do you know where the kever of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai is?
Huh? Yeah, but do we know as much? Maybe the reason we don't go is because we don't know. Okay, but Lefiza, it doesn't have any particular shaykhs with Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Now, in the Birkei Yosef from the Chidah, in Orachaim Simatov Tzadik Gimel, he assumed that Lag BaOmer is also the day of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai's passing. Lefize, it would be a talking that the simcha on the Bittul HaGzeira of the Magefa we connect it also with the fact that on the day that Rabbi Akiva died a natural death on his bed. In other words, would there have been a Magefa, he would have died from the Magefa. And therefore we celebrate the day of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai's Ptira, that he died a natural death. That's how we celebrate the Paschal Amos. But and Be'emes in the Shaz Tshuva Shem Aryeh or Echaim Siman Yodalid, he discusses that l'chora it's a pella that we celebrate a yortzeit. A yortzeit is Yom Shemes B'Yoviv, Yom Shemes B'Rabbi is a tainus. It's not a day for celebration. And he says that we're celebrating Reb Shimon Bar Yochai's death because he died a natural death and he didn't die prematurely during the Magefa. But Be'emes in the Maris Ayin, the Chidah has karota, and he says that not only is there no hint in the Shar HaKoilel, in the Shar HaKavonis, that like Baomer is Rabbi Akiva's day of dying, but Adarabah, it's mashma lahedya that it's not his yortzeit, because he says it's his day of happiness because he was from the 5 Talmidei Rabbi Akiva. So he says it's mashma clearly in the Shar HaKavonis that Lag BaOmer does not have any particular shaykhis with Reb Shimon Bar Yochai in particular. And it also seems in the Sefer Mishnas Chasidim, from one of the great Mekubalim, Reb Emanuel Chai Riki, he also assumes that it's not Reb Shimon Bar Yochai's yortzeit. But nevertheless, the Minig Yisrael, for some reason, is that we celebrate Reb Shimon Bar Yochai on this day. So, we say in the Piyut, V'amartem koi l'chai Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. One of the things we say is Gilo Midrash Hanelam Yochol Lifter Es Ha'olam. He revealed the hidden Midrash. That's the Zohar. And Yochol Lifter Es Ha'olam. He can pater the entire world. What does that mean? That's Gemara in Eruvin Daf Samachet, where Reb Shimon Bar Yochai himself says, Yochol ani lifter es ha'olam kulim midasadin. I'm capable of patering the entire world from midasadin. Rashi says how? Litoin al kol Yisrael lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu davar she'yipatru kulam midina la'asid lavoi loymar shehem shikorin ve'enam nitvasim alavoinam. To say that they're shikr and they're not responsible. So, l'chora, even if Reb Shimon Bar Yochai feels that way about the Jewish people, and even if he feels that he can, claim that limud zchus to the Rebbeinu Shalom, but why is he publicizing it? I mean, it would seem to be irresponsible. I mean, to tell people that they're not responsible for their actions because they can taina that they're shikorim. What's the tayelis of being mefarsim such a message? I mean that yochol ani lifter esa oilam, and what's the expression yochol ani? Either it is a taina or it's not a taina. it depends on Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai makes this claim into a claim. What does he mean to say? You know that it's Yodua B'Shas B'Kama Duchti that Reb Shimon Lesley Muktzah. Reb Shimon doesn't hold of Muktzah on Shabbos. But if you learn the Sugis, it comes out that it's not a general rule, but it depends which Muktzah we're talking about. And the Unterste Shura is that Reb Shimon in Perek Kira doesn't hold of the Muktzah of Migoide Iskatzoi Lebein Hashmoshes Iskatzoi Lekula Yoyma. In other words, Reb Yehuda holds that if there was a candle that was burning Bein Hashmoshes, and you weren't allowed to be metaltalit at that time because of a chshash kibui. So even when the ner burns out, you're not allowed to be metaltalit because it's iskatzoi lebein hashmoshes, iskatzoi lekula yoyme. It was separated, it was set aside. Bein hashmoshes, it was asa betiltul, so it becomes asa betiltul lekula yoyme. And Reb Shimon doesn't hold of that. Then in the end of the first parak in Shabbos, that we have a machlokes about an A's that's dedicated for the purpose of chelbo and tamri de iske, tmarim that are oimed for selling. So Reb Shimon holds that they're muktzah because Reb Yehuda holds that they're muktzah because they're set aside and they're not oimed for my shimush on Shabbos. So it's Muktzah, Reb Shimon, Lesley Muktzah. And then we have in the beginning of Masechtas Beitzah that Reb Shimon, Lesley, the Muktzah of Noilad, a Beitzah Shenoilda B'Yontzef. So l'chayra, these three Muktzahs are all one principle. One principle. What do I mean to say? Reb Yehuda says that Tamri de Iske are Muktzah, because they're oimid for iske, and it's memela, it's set aside from all other tashmishim, which means that Reb Yehuda holds that something's readiness is defined by its official present readiness. In other words, is it oimid for it or not oimid for it? If it's oimid for iske, it's not oimid for achila. That's what defines what this thing is ready for. Whereas Reb Shimon, that doesn't hold of muktzah, holds that what it's officially oimid for here and now doesn't fully define the object, and it doesn't restrict it. The potential is also a dimension in the identity, and since it could potentially be used for something else, so it's considered oimid even for what it can potentially be used, even if it's not right now oimid for that. The same thing is why Migoides Katsoy Lebein Hashmoshes. Rabbi Yehuda holds that since as Shabbos came in, the Kli was also betiltul because of the Chshash Kibut. So the fact that it was mugbal at that time, it defines the object and makes it muktzah l'chol Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon holds that even if mitzad, the condition of the ner at that time, it was not tiltulable, but it had the potential to become a bar tiltul when the ner burns out, and therefore it's not set aside. It's not muktzah. In other words, we say that the potential is also a dimension in the identity of the ner, and the same thing avada is noilad. Noilad is not yet ready, but Reb Shimon says, listen, the leder is potentially here now already, and therefore it's not. It's katzoi midaita. We also find that Reb Shimon holds in Bava Kama Daf Ayin Aleph that davar hagorim lemamen kemamen dami. In other words, the actual mammon that is not here yet, but it could be realized potentially. Davar hagorim lemamen already has a shem mammon. Reb Shimon also holds that kol ha'oimed lizroik kizaruk dami. In other words, not only that the present befoil doesn't restrict the object, adrabah, the future potential makes the object be considered that it already arrived at that destination. Kol ha'omed lizroi kezarik dami. Kol ha'omed livdois kepadui dami. All these things Reb Shimon says in Bava Kama and in Menachos. Now, the future that's not here yet, I mean, is only understandable in an oifen of Mevin Davar Mitoich Davar, but it's not apparent. It's not Nireh La'ayin. So Reb Yehuda that holds that the present state is what defines something, holds that things are defined by what's obvious, what's seen. Reb Shimon holds that the future, the potential future, could also define the present, holds that the pnimius, that's not visible, the pnimius is koiveya. And that might be connected with the machlokes of Reb Yehuda and Reb Shimon in Davar She'einei Miskaven. Reb Yehuda holds that he's chayiv, because according to Reb Yehuda, it's what's visible, what's on the surface that's koiveya, and the act was done. Whereas Reb Shimon says that the pnimius is what is the neshama of the act, and if the pnimius is not there, it didn't happen, and therefore Reb Shimon holds that davar she'einei miskaven is mutter. We have a Gemara in Shabbos Daf Lamed Gimel that says Pasach Reb Yehuda va'Omar Kama noim ma'aseyem shel umazu. He was praising the maisim of the Roman Empire. He says Tiknu shvakim, they made marketplaces. Tiknu ksharim, they made bridges. Tiknu merchetzos, they made bathhouses. Rabbi Yossi shosak. When Rabbi Yehuda said that, Rabbi Yossi was silent. Nene Reb Shimon bar Yochai va'Omar Kol ma shetiknu letiknu elo tzorech atzmon. Whatever they did it for themselves. They're not doing it as a service. They're doing it for their own interests. Tiknu shvakim lahoishu behem zoynis merchetzos la'adin behen atzmon gisharim little mehem meches. So you see Rabbi Yehuda that holds that davar she'einei miskaven is chayiv, because he looks at the chitzonius of the Maisa. So also with regards to the Maisa of the Romans, he says, Kamo noe ma'asem shel umazu. But Reb Shimon says, Al tabeit al narehu. Don't look at the externals. Yeah, it's just like davar she'einei miskaven is potter, because we follow the kavana hapnimis. So also the acts of the Romans are not noim, because it's nidden according to the pnimius hakavana. Yeah, there's a fascinating Gemara in Moed Katan, Davtes, where it says, Pam acheres, Amalei Reb Shimon bar Yochai lebrei. Reb Shimon bar Yochai said to his son, Bnei Adam halolu. He said about two people, Reb Yonasan ben Asamai and Reb Yehuda ben Gerim. He said, Bnei Adam halolu anshei tzura heim. They are anshei tzura. Zil gabehoin delivrechuch. Go to them and be blessed by them. So Ozal Ashkechinu, he went and he found them. And Amrulei, my boy Yisachar, what are you looking for? Amalahu, the Amali Abba, Zil gabayhu delivrechuch. My father told me to come get a bracha. So he says, Yehei Rava, Amrulei, Yehei Rava, the Tizra v'loy techzad, that you should sow and not be koitze. You should be zereya, not koitze. Ta'ayel v'loy teipik, you should bring in and not bring out. Teipik v'loy ta'ayel. Lichroiv bias. Your house should be destroyed. A whole long list of curses. So he said, he came back to his father and he said, I mean, not only that they didn't bless me, but they were metza'er me. What did they say to you? So he said, Hachi v'hachi amruli. This is what they said to me. So Reb Shimon bar Yochai says, Hanach kulu birchasinenu. This is all blessings. Why? Because when he says Tizra v'loy techzad, that you should be zereya and not koitzer, he means toilet banim v'loy yamusu. Should have children and they shall not die. Ta'ayel v'loy teipik means ta'ayel kalosa. Should bring in a daughter-in-law v'loy leimsu b'nach delifkun. And your son shouldn't die, that you should have to be mitzi, the daughter-in-law. And Teipik v'loy ta'ayil, the kids say he teaches us all these statements as a bracha. So it would seem that Reb Shimon bar Yochai sent his son to these Anoshim Shel Tzura, which is really the people that were magbir the Tzura al HaChomer. in order that he should learn the lesson that even what klape chutz seems as a klola, but if you look into the pnimiyus advarim, you will reveal the bracha within the klola. Right? So Reb Shimon is Dorish time of the crow. And that's why he's the Megala of the Midrash Hanelam, which is the Pnimius HaTorah. And since Yisrael v'Iraisa Chadheim, so he also reveals the Pnimius of Yiddish and Hashamas. And that's why Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says that a Yid that sins, he's like a shikr. Because Mibchinas the Pnimius, it's always Ritzoynenu Lasois Ritzoynecha. He's not really thinking with his full mind. He's not feeling with his full heart. He's not being himself. Reb Shimon says a Jew that sins is not being himself. So therefore, Reb Shimon is not saying this taina to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Adrabah, he's talking to us because he's saying that sometimes a person could identify with his borrowed identity. And which is just a reflection of his surroundings, which is just a reflection of society, of something that's not himself. And in our dimyan, we think that that's me. Says Reb Shimon, it's not so. In other words, I can undo all the Rishonim. I can educate every Yid in a way that he should understand, that he should become part from the Midas Adin. In other words, that he should reveal the essence of himself. Is I can convince anyone that he's really drunk, that everything that he's doing, that's Loila Hashem Hema, is not an expression of himself. And if he'll tap into himself, he'll overcome all his evil inclinations. That's the true meaning of Yochel Ani Lifter Es Ha'olam Mi Midas Adin. And the Mela, the chat is like this: the Lifter Es Ha'olam Kol Midas Adin is when a person shakes off the dust and taps into himself, and Reb Shimon is Megala, the Eine Miskaven. In other words, that even if mitzad hachitzonius, we're talking about Tamra de Iska, but it could be immediately changed to something else. And the Iskatzoy Lebein Hashmoshes doesn't determine the future. The future is always changeable. And there's always a noilad that there's a potential noilad that can be realized. And a mele it's Yochel Ani Lifter Es Ha'olam Kuloi Mimidas Adin, and that's the pshat that Gilo Midrash Hanelam Yochel Lifter Es Ha'olam, because just like he's Megala the Midrash Hanelam in Divrei Torah, he's Megala the Midrash Hanelam in every Yid. Yeah, he finds the Pnimius in every Yid, and therefore he's Yochel Lifter Es Ha'olam, because he can help us rise above our borrowed false identity and bring out who we really are. Okay, Rabbi Sai, having said that, I wish you all a freilich and like Baomer.